continuing our cash budget from Managerial Accounting Example 5A. In our previous video, we completed our April cash budget and got to the point where we're going to end April with $60,300. If we're going to end April with $60,300, we're of course going to begin May with $60,300. So we can drop in April's ending balance as our May beginning balance. Our cash collections, we're also going to collect some cash in May like we did in April, so we can drag that number over. And our cash available, again, is going to be the sum of what our beginning balance was plus what we collected. Our merchandise purchases and operating expenses, again, we can drag those over because we're just referencing our prior schedules. Equipment purchases, what are we told about equipment purchases? They're going to be $15,000 in May. And our dividends are going to be $0 because they're only in the first month of the quarter. And so our total disbursements are going to be $1,088,750. Our excess or deficiency of cash on hand this month is going to be $64,950, which is greater than our required minimum balance of $60,000, so we don't have to borrow anything and increase our interest expense. According to our example, we're not going to repay anything until the end of the month, the end of the quarter, and so our financing activity is $0, and so we're just going to leave our $64,950 to be there at the end of June. At the end of May. June is going to work a lot like May. We're going to look down at the bottom of our prior column and say that May's ending balance of $64,950 becomes June's beginning balance. We're going to add the cash collections for June, and we've got a total of $1,311,650. Our merchandise purchases and operating expenses we can drag over again. Our equipment purchases in the month of June are going to be $41,000. Again, no dividends will be paid in June because they're only in the first month of the quarter. And so our total disbursements in the month of June will be $1,060,600, leaving us an excess of cash on hand of $251,050, which is certainly above our minimum balance of $60,000. So we won't have to borrow anything in June. Given our terms, we would repay any of the loans and the interest on the loan at the end of June. We have, again, a relatively unrealistic but simple interest rate issue here. So we've got interest of 1% per month. So we're going to go ahead and calculate the interest. I'll put in as a negative because it's a cash outflow. Minus 0.01 times the $25,000 times 3 months. If we're borrowing at the beginning of April and repaying at the end of June, we have it outstanding for all of April, all of May, all of June. That's 3 months. So the total amount of interest that we're going to incur is $750. After paying the interest, we still have plenty of cash left over to pay back the entirety of the loan. So we'll be able to do that. And so our total financing activity is an outflow of $25,750. And we're going to end the quarter with the month of June and the quarter with $225,300 of cash. Our quarterly cash budget has some of the same issues that our quarterly merchandise purchases budget does, in that we have beginning and ending issues. So again, I'll mark these in yellow for you, so you can be aware of the beginning and ending issues. The beginning cash for the quarter is not April plus May plus June, but our beginning balance for the quarter is what our April 1st cash was, $219,550. We can add across the activity during the quarter. And so the total cash that we're going to have in our hands at any point during the quarter is going to be $219,550 plus a $3,012,000, or $3,232,350. All of the cash activity, outflow activity during the quarter, again, we can simply add those up. There's no beginning or ending balances there. And so the total outflows are going to be $3,006,300. And so the excess or deficiency on hand from a quarter-wide basis is going to be $226,050. Now here's where our doing our cash budgeting not terribly often shows it as a problem. If we just looked at the quarter, we would look at this and say, hey, from a quarter-wide standpoint, if I was going to have $200,000 of cash on hand, I don't need to borrow anything at all. When we break that quarter into a finer time period of a month, we say, hey, wait a minute, yeah, even though from a quarter standpoint we'll be okay, all that really comes at the end. At the beginning of the quarter, we're actually going to be a little bit short on cash. So we're going to have to borrow early in the quarter. If we only looked at the quarter, we wouldn't really have any way of telling that we actually do need to borrow. The more finely, the shorter a time period you look at your cash budget, the more likely you are to notice times when you need to borrow. If you take too zoomed out of a view, if you take too long-term of a view of your cash budgeting, you will likely find yourself missing times when you need to borrow. If we look at our financing activity, we can see that during the period, we're going to borrow and repay and pay some interest. And so the net effect of all the financing, 25 grand of a loan comes in, 25 grand of a loan payment goes out, that washes. But the $750 interest that we pay to borrow the money for the 3 months, that's the net effect of our financing activities. And so we do need to add our cash on hand and subtract from our cash on hand the interest expense that we're going to pay. And so our ending balance for the quarter should match up to be the ending balance for the month. If it doesn't, you've done something incorrectly. But that's something that we need to check. So that's our cash budget, starting with our beginning cash of $219,550, which is what we had at our March 31st balance sheet, going through all the increases and decreases in cash we expect for the quarter. And we should end June 30th and end the quarter at the same amount of cash because, of course, those are the same time period. So whatever we have on hand at the end of June will be our ending balance for the quarter.